The afternoon sun, weak and buttery, cast long shadows across the granite expanse of City Hall Plaza. Officer Frank Miller gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, his knuckles white. Beside him, Officer Ken Davies, barely a year out of the academy, was trying to make a dent in a lukewarm coffee. "Look at this place," Miller grumbled, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to emanate from the very chassis of the Ford Interceptor. "Used to be, you could be proud of this city. Now, it's all protests and politics, every damn corner." Davies nodded noncommittally, sipping his drink. He had learned early on that agreeing with Miller was the path of least resistance. Frank Miller was a cop from another era, a man who saw the world in stark, unambiguous lines of right and wrong, us and them. And for Miller, them was a rapidly growing demographic. It was then that he saw him, a man maybe in his late 50s, sitting alone on a bench near the fountain. He was unremarkable in every way, worn jeans, a simple gray hoodie, comfortable-looking sneakers. He could have been a tourist, a local on his lunch break, a ghost, but it was the hat that snagged Miller's attention like a fishhook. It was a simple, dark blue baseball cap, with one word stitched in clean white letters: "Vote." To an outsider, it was a civic sentiment, as neutral as a flag or a national anthem. To Frank Miller, it was a battle cry. In the bitterly divided landscape of the city's politics, that simple blue hat was the unofficial uniform of the opposition. It was the symbol of the party that coddled criminals, that defunded the police, that put people like him, the real guardians of the city, in their crosshairs. A slow, hot anger began to build in Miller's chest. He saw the man not as a citizen, but as an antagonist, a provocateur sitting there in the shadow of City Hall, silently mocking everything Miller stood for. "That's it," Miller said, putting the car in park with a sharp jerk. "I've had enough of these people thinking they can rub our noses in it." Davies glanced over, his young face creased with confusion. "Rub our noses in what, Frank? He's just sitting there." "You don't get it, kid," Miller sneered, his eyes locked on the man on the bench. "It's not about what he's doing. It's about what he represents. That hat. It's a middle finger to law and order. He's loitering, trying to start trouble. I can feel it." The self-righteousness felt warm, empowering. This wasn't just a random stop. It was a righteous stand. He was drawing a line in the sand. He was protecting the sanctity of this plaza, of his city, from the slow poison of political decay. He swung the car door open. "Come on, we're going to have a chat with him about the city's solicitation and public display ordinances." Davies sighed but complied, grabbing his nightstick more out of habit than necessity. As they approached, the man on the bench looked up from the book he was reading. His eyes were a calm, intelligent gray, and they held no trace of fear as the two uniformed officers loomed over him. "Good afternoon, officers," the man said, his voice even and pleasant. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Miller began, intentionally crowding the man's space. He jabbed a thumb toward the man's head. "The hat. It's a political statement. We have an ordinance against unpermitted political displays in the plaza." Davies shuffled his feet. He was fairly certain no such specific ordinance existed, at least not in the way Miller was framing it. The man's expression didn't change. He simply tilted his head. "An ordinance against a hat that encourages civic participation. That seems counterintuitive. Could you please cite the specific municipal code for me?" The calm, rational question was like gasoline on Miller's fire. He hated that condescending tone, the language of lawyers and liberal elites. "Don't get smart with me," Miller snapped. "I'm telling you to take the hat off and move along. You're disturbing the peace." "Whose peace am I disturbing?" the man asked, his gaze sweeping across the nearly empty plaza. A few pigeons pecked at the ground. A mother pushed a stroller in the distance. "I was just reading." "You're disturbing my peace," Miller declared, his voice rising. This was the moment he had craved a confrontation where his authority was absolute, his cause just. He felt a surge of power. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Remove the hat and vacate the plaza, or you'll be arrested for failure to comply." The man slowly closed his book, marking his page with a finger. He looked from Miller's flushed, angry face to Davies's uneasy one. "Officer," the man said, his voice dropping slightly, losing its pleasantness and taking on a new, hard edge of warning. "I would strongly advise you to reconsider this course of action. You are making a significant and irreversible error in judgment right now, both of you." The quiet authority in his voice should have been a red flag, a siren's wail in the fog. But to Miller, it was the ultimate challenge. This man wasn't just an opponent. He was an arrogant one. "Error?" Miller laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The only error here is you thinking you're above the law. You're one of those people who think you can do whatever you want. Well, not in my city. Not today." He turned to his partner. "Davies, give me your zip ties." Davies froze. "Frank, for a hat? We can't. He's refusing a lawful order and inciting a public disturbance," Miller lied, his voice a low command. "Now give me the ties." Reluctantly, Davies pulled a pair of heavy-duty plastic cuffs from his belt. The man on the bench watched them, his expression shifting from calm warning to something else, a kind of detached, clinical observation. He wasn't scared. He was studying them. "Last chance," Miller barked at the man. "Get up and get out." The man didn't move. He simply said, "Your name is Officer Frank Miller, badge number 714. Your partner is Officer Ken Davies, badge number 921. Is that correct?" The fact that he knew their badge numbers without even seeming to look sent a flicker of unease through Davies, but Miller was too far gone. "So you can read. Big deal," Miller snarled. He snatched the ties from Davies. "All right, you asked for it." What happened next was a blur of misplaced fury and gross misconduct. Miller hauled the man off the bench. The man offered no resistance, which only seemed to infuriate Miller more. He shoved him against the cold, ornate lamppost in the center of the plaza. He cinched the zip ties tight around the man's wrists, binding him to the pole. The blue vote hat was knocked off in the struggle, falling to the pavement. A small crowd of passers-by had started to gather, their phones already out, recording. Miller felt a thrill. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when you disrespect the law. "Let this be a lesson," Miller announced to the man and to the small, shocked audience. "We don't tolerate agitators here." The man, now bound to the pole, looked at Miller. There was no anger in his eyes, no fear, only a profound and chilling disappointment. It was the look of a craftsman examining a flawed tool just before discarding it. "The lesson is indeed being taught, Officer Miller," the man said, his voice resonating with an unnerving finality. "Just not by you." It was at that exact moment that the sleek black sedans arrived. They didn't speed in with sirens blazing, but pulled up to the curb with a quiet, indisputable authority. Doors opened and men in dark suits emerged, their movements crisp and professional. From the lead car stepped two figures who made Officer Davies's blood run cold. Mayor Thompson and the current chief of police, Robert Jennings. They strode towards the scene, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. The mayor spotted the man tied to the pole first. His eyes went wide with horror. "Arthur! My God! What is happening here? Are you all right?" Chief Jennings saw it a second later. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, waxy mask of sheer terror. He looked at Miller and Davies as if he were seeing two ghosts who had just signed his death warrant. Miller's self-righteous rage evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sickening dread. "Arthur?" The mayor knew this man by his first name. The mayor and his security detail quickly cut the zip ties. The man, Arthur, rubbed his wrists, his calm demeanor never wavering. He picked his blue hat up from the ground, dusted it off, and placed it back on his head. He then turned to the chief of police. "Chief Jennings," he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of command. "Mr. Vance," the chief stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what to say. This is unacceptable." "Vance." Arthur Vance. The name echoed in the recesses of Miller's mind, a name he'd seen in memos and news clippings but never connected to a face. Arthur Vance, the billionaire philanthropist and civic reformer, who had just been secretly appointed by the mayor to take over the department. The new, and not yet publicly announced, police commissioner, their new boss. Miller felt the ground beneath him dissolve. The entire world tilted on its axis, and the only thing holding it together was the terrifyingly calm gaze of the man he had just tied to a pole. Arthur Vance looked past the stammering chief and the shell-shocked mayor. His eyes, cold and analytical, settled on the two officers. "Officer Miller, Officer Davis," he said. The use of their titles felt like a final, formal judgment. "When I accepted this position, I was told I would be leading a department of professionals dedicated to upholding the law and serving every citizen of this city, regardless of their background or beliefs." He took a step closer, and both officers flinched. "In the last 10 minutes, Vance continued, his voice cutting through the plaza's stunned silence, you have demonstrated the exact opposite of that ideal. You ignored a citizen's rights. You invented a non-existent ordinance to justify your personal political bias. You used excessive force not to keep the peace, but to humiliate a man you had already judged based on a piece of cloth. You did all this publicly, turning your badge into a symbol of tyranny instead of protection." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You are a disgrace to the uniform. You are precisely the cancer I was brought here to cut out. As of this moment, consider your employment with this department terminated. Both of you." He looked at Chief Jennings. "Chief, have them escorted to the 17th to turn in their badges and firearms immediately. Their conduct will be reviewed by Internal Affairs and the District Attorney's Office." Miller opened his mouth to protest, to explain, but no words came out. The righteous fire that had burned so brightly in his chest was gone, leaving only cold, black ash. He saw his career, his pension, his entire identity, crumbling into dust before his eyes. He wasn't a guardian. He was a thug who had picked the wrong fight. Davies just stared at the ground, tears welling in his eyes. He had followed a bad order, and it had cost him everything. As other officers arrived to carry out the grim task, Arthur Vance turned his back on them and walked with the mayor towards City Hall. "Well, Robert," Vance said to the pale chief of police, his voice devoid of any emotion, "it seems our work is cut out for us. Let's start with a full review of the 17th Precinct's training on de-escalation and constitutional rights. Clearly, it's not taking. The last thing Frank Miller saw before being led away was the simple blue hat disappearing into the grand entrance of the building. It wasn't a symbol of a political party or a provocation. It was just a hat. The real problem, he understood in a moment of terrible, gut-wrenching clarity, had been the man wearing it, not the one on the bench, but the one in the mirror.